Hey guys.
Hello,
Hello.
everyone.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good. What about you all?
Hi everyone.
This is Mifal. The people who gave me grants yesterday, they gave healers. I don't know, try my phone.
Get started in a sec. All right, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to the fourth iteration of our Youth Prep series hosted by NGO CSW New York's cohort of Global Youth Fellows for Gender Equality. The Youth Preparation Series aims to provide a platform for young voices to share experiences and discuss advocacy strategies in the much anticipated lead up to the UNCSW and NGO CSW forum this March. So I'll pass it off to today's fellows, Isha, Marina, Helix, and Zita.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this call. And we are so excited to have you all. I am Helix. I'm from Cameroon. I'm currently pursuing a bachelor in computer application in India, and I'm a member of Mifali, an adolescent-led movement in Cameroon that works with various young people from diverse backgrounds, especially young girls from internally displaced areas in our country. And we focus mostly on sexual reproductive health rights and girls' empowerment. So we are once more excited to have you all here, and I would like to pass over the floor to Marina.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for some of you. My name is Marina Chikos, and I'm a feminist gender equality professional, currently representing the Society of Gender Professionals. I'm a Roma woman, and I'm based in Hungary, in Budapest at the moment, and I'm very excited to talk about how migration affects Roma women specifically and the Roma population specifically. And I'm really excited. Pass over to Isha.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so very much for making the time to join us today. We have an exciting lineup. I'm joining you from Erbil, Iraq, so my internet bandwidth is not strong enough. That's why I don't have my camera on, but I am a certified policy officer specializing in human rights, international law, and gender studies. And I'm very excited to be part of this forum and organizing it with my co-fellows. So I guess without any further ado, I would pass the mic back to Marina to give us sort of an overview of this event, and we will get right to the exciting stories that we have to present today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Isha. So let's start our workshop with a question. Why do you think it is crucial to integrate an understanding of gender relations into the study of migration processes and to incorporate a gender perspective into migration research? This necessity arises not only because women comprise just under half of international migrants globally, but also because gender serves as a fundamental aspect of societal differentiation, interacting with other dimensions like age, class, ethnicity, nationality, race, disability, and sexual orientation. Migration drivers affect women, men, and gender diverse people disparately, leading to distinct circulation patterns between rural and urban areas, intra-regional or global movements. Labor markets often exhibit high segregation, and the ability of women and men to cross borders may be constrained or facilitated by gender discourses, practices, and regulations governing the right to migrate and associated conditions. Additionally, migration can bring about changes in gender relations within households and communities, influencing gender and sexual identity. On this occasion, our group brought together experts on gender and migration and people who have experience with how gender and migration affect their social interactions, possibilities in the labor market, etc. We think that to effectively work on migration policies, projects, and laws, we need to incorporate the life experiences of those who experience migration at some point in their lives. Therefore, besides discussing some of our professional concerns regarding gender and migration, we also have guest speakers who, through their life experiences and stories, will demonstrate us how some of the challenges marginalized communities can face nowadays. As our first discussion, I will be talking a little bit about EU Mobile Roma and how gender-specific challenges experienced by Roma women in Europe. The term EU Mobile Roma refers to individuals from Roma ethnicity who are EU citizens exercising their right to free movement. While it is challenging to determine exact numbers, a significant proportion of EU Mobile Roma come from Romania, Bulgaria, and Slovakia. Their migration to other European countries is primarily driven by factors such as poverty and economic and social discrimination, including barriers to the labor market, and is not necessarily linked to the nomadic lifestyle like many people still believe that Roma have. A survey conducted by FRA in 9 EU countries revealed that 80% of the interviewed Roma were at risk of poverty, in contrast to EU average of 17%. The vulnerability of EU Mobile Roma is influenced by several factors in their countries of origin, including low levels of education, limited access to basic needs, healthcare, social security, and housing as well as lack of formal work experience, extreme poverty, absence of documents, and the structural issue of anti-Gypsyism, a specific form of racism towards Roma people. As a vulnerable group, Roma, especially children and women, face a high risk of human trafficking. Despite the diversity among EU Mobile Roma, with some experiencing fewer obstacles, those with formal education still encounter challenges in finding employment due to the highlighted factors. I can also unfortunately demonstrate this. To demonstrate some of the challenges faced by EU Mobile Roma, and more specifically young Roma women, now I would like to introduce Zita Cikós. She is a young Roma woman from Hungary who is currently residing in Leipzig in Germany. Please welcome her. Zita, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. As Marina already said, my name is Zita Cikós and I'm from Hungary. I would like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to share my thoughts and experiences about the topic. My story as an EU Mobile Roma started about half a year before I moved to Germany, right after I decided to start my studies in the university in Budapest. What happened after this was I was stuck at home in my little village, applying to every single job in the area, even for the ones with the embarrassingly low salaries. And of course, as you would expect, I wasn't invited to even one interview. And that went on for some weeks, months, and then my mom sent me a warehouse job advertisement of a logistics company in Germany for very good money. The idea to work abroad was not unfamiliar to me because in my extended family, it kind of became a normal thing to work similar jobs to this abroad for way better money and less risk to get fired or even not to get hired for the color of our skin. My uncles often spend months working abroad in constructions, and my nieces and cousins in warehouses. My mother had already worked abroad for multiple years after being mentally destroyed by working in warehouses in Hungary most of her adulthood. So I applied, and about 3 months later, I was in Germany. But obviously, I was really inexperienced and innocent. Therefore, I wasn't prepared for what it is like in the world alone as a young Roma girl. I learned very fast how to communicate smartly with people, when it's okay to mention that I am Roma, when it's better to just say that I am from Hungary, but still trying not to lose my Roma identity, and how to smile it off when someone tells me, "Oh, I thought you were Latina, you look completely like it." I would say that for 90% of the time I don't have regrets that I moved here, but in that 10% belongs the fact that to this day I am handicapped by agencies and offices because they only see the little brown migrant girl when they look at me. I have been fined for things that my German guy friends got away with. I had to wait for documents, money, or feedbacks way more than my German friends had to. At one occasion, for example, 1 year ago, it was still obligatory in Germany to wear face masks on public transport because of the COVID. I always had one with myself, but exactly on that day, I left it all at home. So when the controllers got on the tram, of course, they came to me immediately. A nice stranger on the spot gave me one to wear, but for the controllers, it wasn't enough. And after mildly humiliating me on the tram, I had to get off with them, and I was fined after. Later that day, I heard from a German guy friend of mine that he was caught multiple times without a mask, and he always got away with it. I remember the anger and unfairness I felt about it for weeks, and this is only one of the more stories of mine, and who knows how many other people have to experience similar or worse treatment as foreigners, EU mobile Romas, but they still decide rather with this than staying in their home countries. I am not a person of politics, but I do see that it is a systematic problem. And that is why I think that the work of different minority organizations and foundations is so important for all of us. We need these organizations and foundations to have some place to turn to for help and to get educations about what our rights are and how to use them. Thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Zita, for sharing your story, which is unfortunately not really common here in Europe, but I guess elsewhere as well. Now I would like to pass the floor to Hilux, who will also talk about his own experience. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mari, and I really appreciate the insightful contribution, especially from EU Roma and from Zita's experience. It's really interesting to hear this experience that keep up people living every day and keep people inspired. So I would like to share my own experience as my personal experience migrating from Cameroon to India to pursue my studies with a specific focus on gender-specific challenges encountered by different people like me and other classmates and people who I had the opportunity to meet. So upon arriving in India for my bachelor degree as an adolescent, it was yet filled with a lot of learnings and challenges, especially around cultural adjustment, particularly concerning different gender dynamics and differentiation that exists in various communities. So the first thing became the assimilation process for me, where I had to first of all adapt myself to the cultural norms as well as the gender differentiation between different people, because going to different countries, we happen to have different rules and different norms attributed to people based on their gender. So it was quite a bit difficult to learn that, because migrating to India, like many other people, was my first experience leaving my country. So some of these challenges that were faced by me, like I said, navigating through the cultural dynamics of the country were a bit difficult. For example, adapting to new social expectation regarding gender roles and complexities. For this, I can say the recommendation that I can give in this can be fostering cultural sensitivity in different host community, because we might happen to be host of various people anytime in future or now. What I would like to recommend in this case would be fostering cultural sensitive host community where we can have the promotion of awareness and diverse norm, and also offering a network that aid newcomers from different zones, especially students and a lot of young girls that I've known went into depression, not because they are not performing well in their school, but the education space and the gender representation does not permit them to excel well within the academic environment. For example, there's the gender disparities that persist where female students migrating from different countries to pursue their education, maybe due to forced displacement or lawful migration, may find themselves confronting imbalances in education opportunities. And addressing this issue might necessitate not only local efforts, but global efforts, not talking about a specific case here in India, but looking at the situation around different countries, the challenges of stereotypes that limit the choices of a lot of girls to pursue their education in an inclusive environment that promote gender equality must be addressed. And there's also this aspect of women in tech and leadership that is also mostly neglected from my experience, because the technology sector remains a beacon of innovation, and yet there's a lot of gender imbalance in this sector, especially for migrant women pursuing different careers in technology and leadership. So while moving, there are a lot of barriers which needs to be dismantled, and especially young students I'm talking about, who go into a new dynamics in a new country, maybe to pursue their higher studies, especially girls in tech. They face a lot of issues concerned with regards to their inclusivity in the industry and the different cultural values and expectation from their role. Many women, for example, moving their country are not expected to maybe focus in the technical domain, and in the industry culture does not foster values that promote inclusivity. There's these particular issues around accommodation and housing affordability that I would also like to mention here, because in a lot of countries where girls migrate from their country maybe to study, they face a lot of challenges while trying to have accommodation out of their university location. We always know that in some university, especially taking the example of what we have here, university accommodation sometimes might be more expensive compared to local accommodation. And for different boys like me, it's very easy to get one. But for a lady, it is very difficult to get an accommodation out of a hostel, because it is not allowed to many women to live alone here without being married. That brings a lot of restriction for students who face a lot of challenges in order to find good accommodation for ladies out of their hostel. And lastly, I would like to mention about recognizing the different laws that different countries might take into consideration, because these might be taken as very little issues, but trust me, as a person traveling 1,000 miles to go and pursue education and living these different imbalances might put you into a lot of depression that might even affect the reason why you decided to travel to go and study and pursue your education. And for parents, it's not very easy also to know that they send their children, especially in case of girls from coming from a Cameroon background. I know that a lot of parents might be might face a lot of challenges and might how can I say it, might be very scared about sending their girl child study abroad because of the different challenges that they might face. Very little challenge can cause a parent to go very depressed about how their children are being looked upon elsewhere, whether they are being integrated, and this goes mainly with regard to girls. So one strong mechanism to address this can be the creation of a global compact for gender equality in migration, because there are a lot of global compacts that addresses various issues, but there is still yet strong laws and regulations that will enable the regulation of the voices of migrants, including students who migrate from various locations to go and pursue their education. So on these notes, based on the different issues that a lot of people face, including young girls in my country migrating internally, migrating from one region to another due to the crisis. I would like to introduce as the next speaker, Liz Lum, who is a young leader fighting for gender equality and inclusive society. She led initiatives such as providing emergency pad kits for girls in schools. She led initiatives like emergency pad kits for schools and campaigns for tax-free periods products in Cameroon. Liz is a board member of Comagen Cameroon, where she works with internally displaced girls on sexual reproductive health and HIV services, delivery policy monitoring and implementation. She is a youth advisory for exemplars and in adolescent sexual reproductive health project and award-winning storyteller at World Pearls. Her ultimate goal is youth equality in leadership, policy, and decision-making processes. I'm happy to introduce once more again Liz Lum. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilux. Guys, I'm so sorry. My network is crap today. I'm in a very unremote area. I'm so happy to be joining this panel. And also, that was quite an introduction for just a young girl who wants her voice heard, right? So thank you all so much for having me here. By the way, I could see myself in your story, Zita, as a young girl facing the challenges of internal migration. And I would have to agree with Marina that this is it is all systemic, right? These are things that can be controlled, these are things that can be managed, and these are things that can be stopped. Internal migration, yes, it's a challenge for young girls. But then what happens when the migration is forced? Then we get to enter into deeper levels of marginalization, uncovering how deep-rooted this issue is and how it affects girls, especially. Now I'm using girls because, of course, I'm a young girl and I'm from Cameroon. And as Hilux mentioned, we have had a violent and armed conflict here for the last 6 years. And I'm originally born in where this conflict started. So Cameroon is bilingual. We speak both English and French. And where the war or where the conflict is where we English speakers live. So it's a French region and then an English region. And then it is divided, 80% of the population is French speaking, while 20% of that population is English speaking. Now, I'm giving this background so we can begin to picture and see the levels of marginalization. So first of all, I'm from a minority, English-speaking people. I am a young girl, and then I was forcefully displaced because of the war. So what are we looking at here? 3 or more levels of, the classic marginalization in terms of migration. So I can remember as a 14-year-old, we had to flee. My family and I, we had to run with nothing but the clothes on our backs to a French-speaking village, a very rural French-speaking village, because of the conflict, because of the war. And I cannot begin to tell you how hard that was, how we struggled to fit in, how we struggled to integrate and have a life. Now, from my bio that was read, you would know that I had been engaged in human rights and women's rights as early as 10 years old. So maybe that background, knowing that I actually have a voice and knowing that actually I could talk to people, I could share my story through different mediums, got me going. It changed my story somehow. But I bet you a lot of my peers, many of my friends that we were in school together, they were not as lucky as I was. And so when we're looking at internal migration, especially the one that is forced on young girls, we're looking at various disruptions. First and foremost, on their education. We know how important education is for a young girl in this world as it stands now. We need that education because it not just gives us skills, but then it gives us a place. It gives us a way, to contribute and develop the world that we live in. And so when there is this conflict, there is disruption of education and educational opportunities for young girls. Back to my story, I was, a science student. I did science my whole life, right? But then I have to move to a French-speaking town. I have to adapt to the language. But then there was no science for young girls like me. You are English speaking and you were displaced. There was no science for you. I had to change majors. That tampered with the whole dream of me becoming a surgeon and saving lives. I'm not a surgeon today because I could not have education that allowed me to become a surgeon, right? Now, this is the disruption of education. But then I'm still lucky. Why? Because I have my classmates, my friends who dropped out, changed the language, changed from speaking English to speaking French, and then you're trying to have access to, the thing that you really wanted to do with your life, education-wise. Now, this was very challenging. The very next thing as well that usually hampers and destroys the well-being of young girls that have been forcefully displaced is healthcare. Now, I cannot overemphasize this enough. I know that sexual and reproductive health is the bedrock of gender equality. When a woman is able to take charge and manage her sexuality, she is able to make best decisions for her life and for herself. And so this services, this comprehensive sexuality education services, where we had hospitals to go get, information about the best contraceptives to use, or basically just, family planning advice. These services don't exist anymore. Remember, we're talking about a rural community that is French speaking. So where is your place? There is no place for a young girl like this in that community. And so I had a lot of my peers who fled as we did, fall pregnant during that period. They were exposed to a lot of STIs, all of which were preventable. And also, the other thing that made me, I was so angry, but what, shined light on how systemic this is and how this can all be controlled is our government was not prepared for the pandemic, this global outbreak. They were not prepared for the pandemic. And then imagine what it is for somebody who does not even fit in. You don't have services for yourself. And then the pandemic comes, what happens? The exposure was just too much, right? You have people having to grapple with I don't even have access to a hospital that would take care of me and my sexual needs. And then there is COVID. And then there is COVID. Who is going to listen to you? Who is going to talk to you? And so it was left at the mercy of, charitable organizations, women's rights organizations who had capacity to enter into rural communities to share face masks and, bottles of sanitizers. But then how sustainable is that? How long was that going to last? And so we begin to uncover how, that the policy implications of this, the structural implications of this, how unprepared and systemic this issue is. The other thing was, how increased the vulnerability level got, right? How vulnerable I became, sorry. Now this is, in this particular region still, this is where I got sexually assaulted by a policeman. Now this is a policeman, this is where I'm supposed to run to and say, hey, I've been sexually assaulted, I need help. But then it was a policeman who did this. I can't talk because I'm an English girl. When I'm trying to explain what happened to me, the language, of course, gets into the way. And then it is most likely nobody's going to listen to me because there's no referral pathway. There's no system that takes into account what I'm feeling and what I'm going through. And so you see many of my peers had to move into what? Survival sex. They had to move into involuntary sex work in order to survive. And with this comes its own level of challenges and risks, the health risks, the safety risks, because right now, from that level, from that time up to now, the femicide in this country has drastically increased. You find dead girls on the streets every day. You find missing reports of girls every day because we don't know where they went to just to survive. The other vulnerability is trafficking. Now, because families moved and they're trying to, uplift the economic burden, girls are now the ones who are, up for sale, married early, sent out to go and work in people's homes for money, but then they are actually trafficked. There are many families who cannot trace where their children are because they gave their daughter away, they gave their child away for as low as $100 just to survive. And now this is really systemic, because what if we just had systems in place to cater for, different people? I put different in quotes because this is a bilingual country, and you have English and French speaking people. Why not have a center that caters for them? Why not have a center that is programmed and led by these people to be able to handle their own issues and handle their own needs? And now we're also looking at the increased rate of sexual and gender-based violence. Remember, I mentioned moving, we need to survive. And so aside survivor sex, there is early marriages. You found girls who were hanging on to men from French-speaking areas because I just need protection. I just need a place to lay my head. I just need someone who guarantees, who can be, a symbol of protection for me, a symbol of safety for me. But then we have distorted what safety really means, right? We don't have an idea anymore. We don't have a clear picture of what exactly is safe, what exactly is right, what exactly is acceptable. And so the rate of gender-based violence, that point, was over the roof. My sister, she was raped at that time by a cousin of ours, because conflict, we have to hang together and try to survive for each other. But then she was raped in the house by our cousin, right? And so how do you report this kind of case? How do you treat this kind of case? This is elevating sexual gender-based violence, because what? People started a war that girls had no say in it, and then they had to run and then fight for their lives. Now, this isn't right. The other levels of challenges for young girls is their limited access to opportunities and decision-making spaces. Now, I can't even scream this loud enough. Where were we supposed to input into decisions that were being made as regards how our healthcare goes, how our education goes? We are barely having that education. So how do we go to input? What rescued me was my continuous affiliation and connection to girls' rights organizations, to movements that were, raising our voices, amplifying our voices, getting funding and grants to be able to push, for opportunities for young girls. That is what kept me going. I remember I created like a small sister safe space with my language barrier. I had a small sister space where I, was just trying to help girls as little as I knew. I drew charts. I think I have pictures of those. I drew charts of the reproductive system and everything, just to teach girls about the menstrual cycle. And then we used local tools to make menstrual bracelets to help them count, because where we were, there were cultural barriers. By 16, if you're not married or you did not have a kid, you were considered an outcast. They will tell you things like, oh, your womb will get blocked because you don't have a child at 16. So you need to have a child ASAP. These were the different kinds of cultural sensitivities. I don't know if I dropped out. Hello, can you still hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry. If this gets too much, just let me know. I can put up my camera because I need to. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so there was this whole cultural barrier, and then I was just there with I had a lot to say. I had a lot I wanted to do, but how do I do this? How do I say this? It was just, like I said, my continuous affiliation to girls' rights organizations that we were able to, I was able to stay in touch and at least keep myself going. I've never even touched the psychological impacts, how traumatic this is, because you are being reminded of how you do not fit in, you do not belong here, right? There's so much exploitation, work exploitation. You go to work and you are very much underpaid because you are English speaking, you do not belong here, and of course you are a girl. So this is different levels of marginalization. This is just, I don't know. And basically what I would have loved, I'm getting now into solutions part, yeah? What I would have loved to see, the things that I would have loved to have around me, things that would have helped me integrate into that kind of community seamlessly. And, I use me, but I would still say I was very lucky because I had this exposure of working with girls' organizations and learning that I have a voice that I can use. But that was not a decision of my peers who just, had to go with whatever they saw, go with whatever, there was. And I'd like to piggyback on Zita's idea of, protection from violence and exploitation, establishing and enforcing policies that prevent and respond to gender-based violence, including sexual exploitation and abuse that is within displacement settings, and providing safe spaces and psychosocial support programs to help girls cope with trauma and to build resilience. Now, I figured during that time, there was a lot of disconnect between what the government was trying to do for displaced people and what organizations that were on ground were doing. There was this disconnect. And if we're able to bridge this gap between what the government is able to do at their level, at their policy and decision-making level, and what the grassroots organizations can do in terms of action and information and access to those who are actually marginalized, we'll do great work, bridging the gap between what is promised and what is actually, existing, between what is said and what is done. We need to bridge that gap and bridge the disconnect. And so we're looking at, government having to revise their policies and revise their collaboration and partnership settings to include grassroots organizations that actually have access to young girls who are vulnerable from migration and forceful displacement. Not only having access to them, but then putting them at the forefront to design the programs and input on the policies and, just give clear-cut designs and directions on the budgetary allocations that would go to help these young girls in these kinds of settings. They should be able to be the ones to make these decisions, control, evaluate, and implement. The other thing that I would have loved is in terms of capacity building, not just for the young girls, but then capacity building for those who would encounter these young girls. Now we're looking at school. The other part of my story that I've not shared is I have had to change the French towns just to fit my educational aspiration. Right now, I have graduated with a degree in IT. I have a bachelor's degree in information technology, which is unbecoming for someone from that kind of background. I had to switch from sciences, and then I found myself in computer science. But it was also very difficult to integrate because not only was I struggling to deal with the fact that, I've always been told my whole life that computer science and tech is just for boys. I have to deal with that on my own. But then I'm in a place where the language, I don't understand it. And the tutors I have are all male, so no role modeling at all. And, just having to deal with that. And so capacity building in this stage is training the people who will be receiving and having contact with the girls from these kinds of areas. I needed tutors who understood that first and foremost, I'm a girl with a head full of gender stereotypes around tech. I also needed a tutor who would understand that I'm from this kind of background and I need extra patience and care. I need extra follow-up and not just bunching me up in a group with the other guys who already knew everything, like that. I also need a tutor who was sensitive to my self-esteem and to my needs in that educational sphere. Out of education, we look at the healthcare. We need capacity building for healthcare providers to ensure access to comprehensive healthcare services, including reproductive health services, mental health support, and nutrition programs. We also need that these healthcare professionals should be trained to address the specific needs of displaced girls, including trauma-informed care. Now, the other aspect, which is very important, was the legal protection aspect. We need our governments to strengthen the legal frameworks to protect the rights of displaced girls, including laws against child marriage, human trafficking, and discrimination. Not just putting these laws, but then facilitating access to legal assistance and support services for displaced girls who may face legal challenges and protection issues. There are many of these girls who were captured by, separatist fighters who were within the war. And when they finally escaped, of course, they became liabilities to these people. Of course, they became targets. Because, who knows, they might go to share information. There are risks, according to, separatist fighters. And such girls need that legal protection. They need protection from their countries. Another thing was also data collection and monitoring. There was no data that exists. Up to now, if you go, maybe you search the web or somewhere, you're not going to find data about girls and the specific challenges they face here. Now, I always like to distinguish between, in the group of women, right, in the group of female, there is women, there is adolescent girls and young women. And whether we like it or not, how these different issues of gender equality affect both parties are different. How they affect me as a young girl is different from how they would affect an older woman. And so we need gender disaggregated data on these kinds of issues. We need, have that they establish robust data collection systems that monitor the well-being of displaced girls and assess the effectiveness of support programs. We also need to make sure that this data is in turn used to inform evidence-based policies and interventions that address the specific needs and challenges faced by displaced girls. And finally, to the final aspect of where I felt like, we needed more intervention from stakeholders would be the aspect of cultural sensitivity and inclusivity. To implement programs that respect and preserve the cultural identity of displaced girls while also promoting inclusivity and tolerance. And we also need to make sure that we engage community leaders and influencers to support the integration of displaced girls into social structures without compromising their cultural heritage. I feel like if we, where these rural communities, if we had the quarter heads, the traditional chiefs and rulers, if we had the religious leaders who existed there at the time, if they were also part and parcel, if they were trained and had information about how to deal with displaced girls, then management of displaced girls in their communities would have been very different. They would have been more sensitive to these issues and would be able to organize their community programs and cultural display to accommodate internally displaced girls, to accommodate internally displaced young people. A lot of my talking, in general, we need every stakeholder to recommit to protecting girls in all vulnerabilities, to protecting girls in all their diversities. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was captivating. My entire focus was on you, and it's just so great to have this panel that we have with Helix, Marina, Zita, and you sharing your experiences. And by highlighting these personal stories, we bring out these complexities of migration and, as you rightly pointed out, the intersections between them. But this is not a new story. This is the story of every migrant in one way or another. In one way or another, every single person here in this room has been part of this, lived this, and experienced this. So this is something, as migrants, we are aware about, and we want, we're frankly very tired, like you rightly pointed out. We talk about this day in, day out, but what comes next? That is something that we've really been grappling with. And Helix, Marina, and I, what we've decided to do is we want to do our part in bridging this gap between experiences and policies. Why does it not exist? So in terms of trying to do that, what we've tried to do is bring about this bridge, this gap between personal narratives where it needs policy dialogues at the intersection of migration and gender. And on that note, I would like to introduce the Center for Migration and Gender Justice's Gender Migration Index. But before I do that, I would leave you in the very capable hand of Dr. Lara-Zuzan Golesorkhi. It's my esteemed pleasure to introduce her, as she's the founder and executive director of this organization that I've been lucky to be a part of. She's also an assistant professor of political science, global affairs, and the co-director of gender, women, and sexuality studies at the University of Portland. She's a scholar, a practitioner, and as a migrant woman, she combines her expertise in the field and with lived experiences in academia and policy work. So without further ado, off to Dr. Golesorkhi.
Thank you very much, Isha, for these kind introductions, and to all of you for having me. As you mentioned, I've just been captured by everything that you've shared, and as unfortunately also said, this is something that is very familiar for myself as well. So I'm happy to be in this space and to share a little bit about what we are trying to do at the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice to center lived experiences in policy planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So I will go ahead and share my screen to provide a brief introduction to the Gender Migration Index that we have developed in this regard. As Isha mentioned, we've had the great pleasure of working together since 2021 now. And while you learned about my professional background, I would like to share a bit about my personal background, my own lived experiences, which indeed have greatly informed the development of the Gender Migration Index and its objective to center lived experiences in policy planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. I am a migrant woman. More concretely, I'm German Iranian. I now live in the United States, and I come from a family that has been displaced over space, time, and generations. And after 15 years in the United States, moving from one migration status to the next, I finally received lawful permanent residency or a green card in 2021. This was a major milestone for me, and my own understanding of these 15 years, as well as the data notification arrived in my mailbox, is well documented through my lived experiences. However, I couldn't find myself, meaning my experience, in existing data by the US Office of Immigration Statistics. So the U.S. Office of Immigration Statistics draws immigration data and statistics on lawful permanent residents across several different data sets. Amongst them, one of them that actually includes gender dynamics with the note that it's sex disaggregated. Yet this data set is limited to only the top 20, filing states in the United States, and the state of Oregon, where I live, and where I filed, is not one of them. So my experience is not included in these data sets. My experience shows up in the data set on lawful permanent residence by citizenship and major class of admission, which then in the actual data set is listed as country of birth. I was born in Germany, but I hold citizenship of Iran and Germany. And I received my permanent residency based on employment. And so here I am one of 430, but gender dynamics are not considered, and neither is my nationality as Iranian. And so my experience as a woman migrant worker of German Iranian descent does not exist as such in these noted data sets. It is too intersectional to understand or to capture, if you wish. And so why am I sharing this with you? Because my experience is that of too many that are not represented in data sets such as these. And if we don't have the data, then we don't have the targeted and adequate policy to address the experiences that are just not in the numbers that we're seeing. And this is actually what motivated me to found the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice and to develop the Gender Migration Index as a space and platform where these intersectional experiences are front and center. So what does the GMI or Gender Migration Index do and how does it work? It's a policy guidance tool. It facilitates gender responsiveness and migrant inclusion in policy planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation by addressing the needs and challenges of women, girl, LGBTQIA+, and gender diverse migrants. The Gender Migration Index is based on an indicator system that centers these lived experiences through participatory action research, and it's aligned with international review processes such as annual, periodic, and regular reviews. And so it strengthens multi-stakeholder engagement and providing criteria for benchmarking policy. Because of this participatory action research approach, the GMI emphasizes the participation and action by members of communities affected by the research and the policy, namely migrant communities and organizations working in the context of migration to democratize knowledge production at the intersection of migration and gender. And so the indicator system follows a three-part structure with overall and policy indicators speaking to the extent to which gender dynamics are mentioned, engaged with, and committed to, and the extent to which migration dynamics are mentioned, engaged with, and committed to. So content, engagement, and commitment as indicators. And then the third set of indicators, namely the migration experience indicators, speak to the extent to which migrants access resources, services, information, and accountability. So resources, services, information, and accountability as indicators. Sorry about that. And so all indicators are analyzed along a traffic light framework that corresponds to limited, moderate, and extensive levels of gender responsiveness and migrant inclusion in policy. So then who analyzes these indicators? The GMI is premised, as mentioned, on collaborative inquiry into gender responsiveness and migrant inclusion in policy, with corresponding engagement in international review processes, such as the UN Commission on the Status of Women. And as part of these efforts, we at the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice, as a migrant, as a women, and as a youth-led organization, analyze the overall and policy indicators, while stakeholders, so migrant communities and organizations working with migrant communities, analyze migration experiences indicators. And in this way, the index is co-curated in its methodology with a very concrete research action trajectory that can result in civil society and shadow reports through these international review processes. It can also result in campaigns and other forms of raising awareness around the intersection of migration and gender. So to demonstrate this further, I would like to just share a case study for which we've applied the Gender Migration Index, first in the context of the Global Compact on Migration and the International Migration Review Forum that took place in 2022, and then also to show how the Gender Migration Index works within gender policy frameworks, such as CEDAW, for instance. And in both of these frameworks, so migration and gender, we looked at the example of Germany as a case study. So in 2022, the International Migration Review Forum took place, where voluntary national reviews were submitted by states on the implementation of the Global Compact on migration. And so we analyzed, and we're currently in the process of creating this massive data set of analysis using the Gender Migration Index of these voluntary national reviews on the Global Compact on migration. And one example being Germany. So we used the voluntary national reviews as the main document to look into to assess gender responsiveness with regards to the implementation of the compact. And you can see our findings here. So in terms of overall gender responsiveness, we found that Germany's voluntary national review has moderate mention of engagement with and commitment to gender dynamics in migration. And we then identified labor as a particular area of concern because there was very limited mention and engagement with gender dynamics. And based on this identification of labor as a policy area of concern, we then partnered with a local community-based organization in Germany for the migration experience indicators, so indicators 3. So again, as mentioned, this is all based on participatory action research, and it's co-curated in its entire process and method of design. So our partner, WOW With or Without, a community-based nonprofit NGO based in Stuttgart, Germany, works to promote equality and diversity in the labor market by addressing intersectional discrimination experienced by migrant women. It's because of their experiences and the work that they do. As a stakeholder, they conducted the analysis of migration experience indicators. And so, as you can see, aligned with the kind of mixed report that we saw with the voluntary national review on the Global Compact on migration, according to WOW, our partner, migrant women moderately access resources and services, but only access information and accountability mechanisms in limited ways. So this gives you kind of a broad overview in terms of how the Gender Migration Index is intended to work when it comes to gender responsiveness in migration. But it also works in terms of migrant inclusion in gender policy. So also on the example of Germany, we analyzed Germany's 9th periodic report to CEDA. So that took place last year in the same manner in terms of indicators, but here focusing on migrant inclusion in gender frameworks. And so overall, we found that migrant inclusion can be identified as moderate in terms of content engagement and commitment. And then when we look into the policy areas more specifically, as you can draw here from the slide, there was very limited migrant inclusion when it comes to labor, health, and political engagement. And the fact that this was the case in a gender framework as well as in a migration framework when it comes to labor really substantiated our findings from the year prior, and also from and including those migration experiences that our partner WOW provided. And so, you know, this is the way that we kind of envision how the Gender Migration Index can address some of the challenges that were mentioned previously, and that it really centers lived experiences when it comes to policy planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. So speaking of which, there's many ways to get involved and opportunities for engagement, and we intentionally designed the Gender Migration Index to work in these different international review processes. Right now, we're focusing specifically on the Global Compact on Migration because regional reviews are taking place. But we've also already used, and actually Isha is a co-author of this report, using the Gender Migration Index for the most recent CEDA review of Djibouti. And so if this is of interest to you and you would like to get involved, we offer training for both researchers, so to become a GMI researcher, to become a GMI partner, and for us to make sure together collectively that we can ensure gender responsiveness and migrant inclusion in different policy frameworks. So with this, I end, and I'll be around for any questions or comments. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so very much. And I think with this, I will just kick off the panel discussion right away. Maybe I'll wait to see if someone from the audience has any questions. I am very thankful that you've been so engaged throughout, even on the chat. So I have my 3 burning questions that I'll keep for later, and I will I'll open the floor up for questions. So if there is anyone that would like to start, you could just unmute yourself. All right, I don't see anyone right now, so I can just jump on with my questions. I think here I would like to bring all of our panelists together, including Zita and Liz Lum. So here we've talked about accountability, we've spoken about community engagement, we've spoken about the need for data-driven and data segregation, and now we've also learned about this tool of GMI. So I guess my question for the entire panel, including Helix and Marina, is how do you think this diverse stakeholders can work together and create lasting change? In what ways can it be practical? From what you've heard so far with the GMI, how do you think that can be used with the personal experiences? So over to you. Marina, I see your hand up already, so I'll give you the floor.
For Liz Lum, if it's okay, not for this, sorry.
Well, I guess then we can go with the order then. Zita, do you have any contributions to this discussion that you've heard so far? You started us off, and through that, the conversation has sort of built up from what you started. So we would really want to hear your thoughts on this.
I would like to add, just like many other people before me, that it was really inspiring to hear Liz's stories and what she had to say, and I learned very much from her. And agreeing with everything that she said, I do think that there should be more more startups to support foreigner women or migrant women, healthcare help, and education about different topics and our rights within the country that we stay at. So yes, that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I go on to our fellows, I will obviously give the floor to our speakers. So maybe Liz Lum and Dr. Golesorkhi, if you have anything more to add on this idea of diverse stakeholders working together. Yeah.
Can I go first or Dr. Lauren? Go ahead. Okay. So from the entire basis of everything I said was I was calling for collaboration. So yes, they have to work together. But then how do they do this? Intergenerational collaboration is the way to go. Intergenerational collaboration and learning, I really feel like this is the way to go. Where you don't just, we want stakeholders to work together, but we don't just want the, superficial working together. You're working together intentionally and working together with accountability. The reason why we've not made any strides, should I say, we've not made any very substantial strides is because we are not holding stakeholders accountable. We don't have any mechanisms, and we don't have any people. We don't know who we're holding accountable or how to hold them accountable. So if we have clear stakeholders and clear tasks and clear responsibilities that each stakeholder has, then we would start looking at how do we hold these people accountable. We just need to make sure that, for example, governments collaborating with grassroots organizations that have access to and are first responders to internally displaced girls or migrant groups. For example, if any decision or any plans or programs, the sectors, in fact, the structures and sectors that are, that are designed for these groups should be managed, handled, led, run by the people concerned, by the group concerned. We cannot have it other ways. We cannot have different people making solutions and making decisions for the people who are actually affected. We need them to lead this decision making. We need them to lead the design. We need them to lead the implementation. But I understand that we may not have, if at that point I was given the opportunity to, take part in any policy or program design that would help adolescent girls and young women, I would have had a lot of ideas, but how do I do it would have been the problem. And so we don't just need to have the space to lead, we need to have capacity building at the corner. We need to have capacity building at the site. That's why I talked about intergenerational collaboration, where we just knowledge sharing, right? You give us a space and we're making decisions, but then we are also receiving capacity building that would help us connect as leaders in that field to go back to our peers, as well as collaborate with government on the other hand. So basically, intergenerational collaboration and accountability, strong accountability mechanisms is going to help us a lot. You.
Thank you, Liz. Dr. G, please take us forward with this discussion. I know there's so much to say here.
Yes, thank you. And wholeheartedly agree with everything that Liz mentioned, that the accountability mechanisms are really crucial with regards to this. And in fact, Isha, if I may pass it back to you, and for you to share your experience in being part of the data review process, having used the Gender Migration Index to analyze the state report, and then actually being in the session with the CEDAR committee. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot right now, but I think this might actually provide a concrete example of how this accountability can work. So passing it back to you.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for bringing all of these points. Oops, sorry, I was speaking on mute. Thank you for passing it back to me. And I think this is such an important point that we raise about accountability. Who are these people that we're supposed to hold them accountable? What are the parameters? How do we engage to them? Because in theory, we have all of these policies that exist, but when it comes to implementation, there is so much of a gap. So I guess how I can describe it best is through my involvement in the CEDA review for Djibouti in itself. So how we started is with the premise of GMI. We started by looking at the state documents that were provided by the Djibouti government in itself. So we saw what are the kind of things that they're bringing forward. So here we already bring in our first stakeholders, the government. We see what they put out on their own. So in addition to this document they put out, we also look at the legal documents. So these are, labor laws, these are health codes, or any of the specifications that you might be interested in. So we review all of this and then we see how does the intersection between migration and gender exist? How are they tackling it? Is it just used for tokenism where they're like, oh yes, we try to do our best, but in theory nothing exists? So we do that as the first step. Then we bring in our partners. So here we look for local experiences, local NGOs, individuals, group of individuals that have more of a personal experience, that know the day to day of all of these situations that happen in Djibouti. So once we do that, we come together, we do our own GMI analysis, our partner does their own GMI analysis, and then we bring it together to create a report that we then send out to the CEDA committee. So then what happens is we have three stakeholders already. We have the government present, we have the grassroots organization, and now we're also bringing in this accountability figure who does, in some way or the other, has the power to hold people accountable at least. So that would be the CEDA community here. So that is the stakeholder. And what I was lucky to do was have this discussion where we talked about real life experiences, because yes, people are experts, people want to talk about a lot of these issues, but every single person, all of these parties have something to offer. So for us, it would be our expertise between migration and gender that we're talking about. This is how we're analyzing it purely from a policy point of view. Our local partners are bringing in this lived experiences that really enriches the report, supports it, triangulates all of our findings. And then when we present it to the CEDA community, they are the ones that then go on to hold the government accountable, if that makes sense. So I think in that way, there is something that there is to be done, but this information is not available for everyone. So I think that is a problem. And I see there are a lot of questions here, and I would love to speak more about this. So definitely reach out to us if you'd like to learn more about the GMI. But I think, oh, oops, Jocelyn had a question and she had to leave, unfortunately. So maybe there is a question from Eva Rodriguez. Eva, if you're still here, you could just unmute yourself and ask the question. If not, I'm also happy to read it out for our panelists.
Hi, yes, I'm here. Thank you so much for all your support to your apportation to this topic. I was wondering about how migrant young population is affected for human trafficking, but the other modality, that is very frequently as sexual human trafficking, that is labor exploitation. I'm living right now in Canada. I'm from Latin America, and I have met a lot of young population that is affected for this modality. And I have noticed how legal economies, legal companies take advantage of the situation of migrant young population, hiring them in non-legal conditions, paying less than is the legal wage page, taking off, asking them more hours of job, in different situations. And also many of them traveling from Latin America to these north countries or these more rich countries as workers, but finding difficult situations in their workplaces. So I have question if you have any analysis about this, if you have known situations. Also, those that are part of families without the status, when they finish the high school, they are facing hard situation because they don't have a status, so they can access to professional education, to a college, or also a legal job. So they are expensed of the illegal economies or legal economies taking advantage of those situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. So who would be our panelist that would start us off? Maybe I will pass it on to Marina and for you to preface in terms of the Roma community and the work that you've already done. I think there is some aspect to be discussed here, if you wouldn't mind, Marina. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Isha. Well, and also Eva for this very specific and very interesting question. Unfortunately, I cannot tell you any analysis or even any research that is specifically looking at this problem, and it can be because I haven't met one or haven't worked with it in comes to young people and specifically them being exploited through legal companies. So we do not even speak about like just like different people or whatever, but especially legal companies. I think that's a very crucial issue because yes, it exists because these legal companies or even natural persons, because these people are vulnerable. Many times they do not have how you say, legal addresses. They can be deported and issues like that. So their vulnerability is very real, and unfortunately, I cannot tell you any analysis or any tool with participants if they can answer to this question.
Maybe before going to Liz or Helix, I know in CMGJ we talk a lot about this issue in itself and more specifically in the context of Venezuela that Eva spoke about in terms of Latin America. So Dr. G, if there was anything you'd like to highlight in terms of this question?
I would have to say that unfortunately this has not been researched to the extent that I could share any findings here with regards to this. But it's really important that we're having this discussion. But I'm afraid this is beyond the scope of my work and my expertise, and also what we had been working on in the context of the Center for Migration, Gender, and Justice.
I know Marina had a question specifically for Liz, so maybe now is the time. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you can hear me well. So thank you so much, Liz, for your intervention again. It was really interesting. Indeed, we have so many similarities with our experiences connect us. My question would be, what do you have in terms of fighting against sexual and gender?
Sorry, Marina, I think you're cutting
Can you
off.
hear
Would
me?
you mind writing the question on the chat, maybe? Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I already want to thank all of you for all the time and commitment that you've given to us, for being so engaged. So yes, I see one question from Helix and then one from Marina, and then we'll close off shortly in the 15 minutes. Just wanted to let you know we appreciate. I see one more question. Sorry, Lux Marina, I would have to bump you down for Anna Lee. So you have the floor right away, Anna.
Hi, good day. I would like to ask Liz a question. What I want to know, right? Like, what these things happen all around the world, and we understand that. But still, it have some of us brave enough to speak up. Yet there are some of us that's still afraid. We don't know what is going to happen and stuff like that. So, how can we, as young women in our society, help out other sisters to come out and speak and get help? You have any advice on that?
Sure. Can you hear me? I want to be sure that my network isn't tripping right now.
Yeah, I can hear.
Oh, great. The only thing that I'd ever just been screaming or saying when I share my story is, we need you to talk about it, to amplify voices. The only thing ever that, like the first and foremost thing, right, that we can all do when we know of stories of our sisters in different areas is to share, is to amplify, is to push the story forward. And then moving on to looking at how to collaborate for change. If you have information or resources that can help organizations in these areas to manage or deal with, to manage and deal with the situations they are facing there with internally displaced girls, we move on. But we really just need you to amplify, add your voices to our voices, and let the story go far and wide. I hope that answers your question. Then I see the question in the chat from Marina. What are the responsibilities of boys in fighting for girls and women's rights, and how boys can help us to fight against GBV, for instance? Now, I'd like to say these things, they affect both boys and girls, but on different levels. But the thing that we have in common is that most of the time, it is the boys or men who are perpetrators of this kind of acts. And I have always, right now, I'm trying to change and restructure how we address or how our messaging and advocacy around GBV, taking the heat of the action away from the survivor or the victim to the perpetrator. Of course, what I'd rather amplify for survivors is what their care, healthcare, trauma assistance, and all of that. But then focusing on messaging around young boys and gender-based violence, their attitudes and gender stereotypes that actually lead them there. Now, I'm not saying there's some sort of scientific explanation as to why a young boy or a man is going to perpetrate violence on a young woman. But what I'm saying is our culture, societal and cultural norms actually lead up to that kind of behavior. Now, as young boys, especially in the African context, as young boys, young boys are already groomed to not to always bottle up anger and emotions, to always, you always have to be hard and rugged. And there are some cultures and there are some communities that exist here that says if you do not, for example, beat up your wife or your partner, then you don't love her enough. Now, it is this kind of, a boy is not born with that idea in his head. It is the culture around that gives that kind of idea, right? And so it is addressing this kind of cultures, it's addressing this kind of cultural, this kind of cultural norms and traditional behaviors that actually put boys on the path to be perpetrators of gender-based violence. The other thing is to remind and actually point out to young boys their privilege of silence, how silent they get when their fellow counterpart will perpetrate that kind of act, especially in the home milieu, where, because the most common form of gender-based violence here is intimate partner violence. And that's basically between intimate partners, most of whom have kids together. And they have kids, male kids as well. When this happens, the young boys are taking a picture of, oh, I have to grow up and do this. But then there's the option, why don't we talk about the option of, I can actually report this. I can actually, change this. I can actually, my duty is to what? Protect my sisters or to stop the next girl from experiencing this kind of thing. It's basically just making sure that our discourses and our interventions for help are gender balanced. When we are targeting the people who are mostly survivors, who are mostly victims. We also target those who are prone to perpetuate this kind of acts and discuss the social cultural norms and behaviors that lead them on that kind of path. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And now I guess for the final question, Helix, I will pass the floor to you and also to wrap up the event. And thank everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina. This has been really interesting discussion. I will just have one question for Dr. Golesorkhi. Sorry for pronunciation. And I would like to know, considering like the global nature of migration, how adaptable is the Global Migration Index in different cultural and regional contexts in ensuring its relevance and effectiveness? Because as Liz mentioned, there are different groups of people, even in within women themselves. There are different groups and different contexts. How does it apply in its adaptability to these different contexts?
Thank you very much, Felix, for this question. When we designed the Gender Migration Index, it was in light of the upcoming International Migration Review Forum, right? The 4 years of implementation of the Global Compact on Migration, where the countries that agreed to implement the compact's provisions would submit some sort of report of how they were doing with regards to this. But of course, these are voluntary reviews. And also, for instance, the Global Compact is a non-binding document. So these were things that we had considered with regards to that. But for us, what was really important is to get started, to create some sort of benchmark to begin with, from which we can then build. And for instance, now 2 years later in 2024, we're now expanding our initial case study analysis, which was intentionally done as a global comparative analysis of individual countries across different regions, that now we are ready to actually dive deep in each of these regions where the regional reviews are coming up. And we have several fellows, research and advocacy fellows, using the Gender Migration Index to analyze these country responses and to focus on specific policy areas within that, and then for us to reach out to partners in these respective countries to create this comprehensive analysis and to write these civil society shadow reports. So we offer training for our partners with regards to the analysis. There's templates. There are guiding questions with regards to this. And it is really the partners, so migrant communities and organizations working with migrant communities, that are making the recommendations, that are sharing practices that are already in place, because they are the experts. And so for us, this kind of 3-part structure of the Gender Migration Index and the basis on participatory action research has worked really well so far in terms of being inclusive in different areas. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, I guess with that, I will have to bring this event to an end. I want to say a huge thank you to NGO CSW first for bringing all the fellows together, and then for all the fellows present on the call for bringing all of your speakers. Thank you so very much. This has been such an inspiring space. I think we all take something back today, and first off, thank you so much for your time, for taking the time, the dedication, for being involved throughout. And I think I saw a lot of collaborations and plans for collaborations happening on the chat already. So I think this is just the beginning. This is just the starting point. And I really hope we can keep this conversation forward, keep this conversation going. We're very happy to stay in contact, stay in touch. And I hope that we continue to do so. So thank you very much for joining. And With that, I wish you all a very good rest of your day, evening, night, wherever you are. Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Thanks to all the
Thank you
panelists.
so much once again. Bye.